Welcome to Lee's Lessons. Today I want to talk about an important subject to me, and that is called osteoporosis and osteopenia, and how it will affect the activities and exercises that we're going to do in our lifestyle if we have that. So our activity will change if you know you have that bone disease. So what is it? What is osteoporosis? Osteoporosis is the loss of bone until the point where it becomes very fragile and it can break. Osteopenia is the beginnings of osteoporosis. It is still a low bone mass. And we do test this through a diagnostic tool called bone mineral density testing. And that's how you know if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia. Now, why is this important in the POTS population? A couple reasons. When we have POTS, we don't tolerate standing very well. And we know that standing and weight-bearing activities is very important to build and maintain bone strength. If we are not standing, if we're lying down a lot or sitting a lot, it's very difficult to improve bone strength through weight-bearing activities. When we have POTS, we also have a big subgroup of people that have mast cell activation syndrome. And an early sign of mast cell activation syndrome can be osteoporosis or osteopenia at an early age. It could be as early as the late teens and 20s. We normally think of this as a bone disease post-menopause, but that may not be the case in much of the POTS population, and it really should be looked at a young age. We need to think about that if we're not active. The other way our bones build strength is through strength training. So if we're doing TheraBand activity, we're doing weight activity, even using our body as resistance, we will and can build or maintain bone strength. When we have POTS, it is very difficult often to do exercises like that, and we don't know what to do, or we have to start at a super low level before we can get into more resistive type of exercises to help bone strength. I do want to talk about movement patterns, including exercises, because there are some contraindications with exercise if you have osteoporosis. We know osteoporosis affects the spine. We have our fabulous little spine here. Here's the back of the spine. Those are the little vertebrae segments that you touch when you touch your back. Here's the front of your spine, and these are your vertebral bodies. And in between you have your discs. We're going to talk about the bony vertebral bodies here. So when it comes to the spine, which is the number one place to fracture your body when you have osteoporosis, they tend to be in the front or a little bit off to the side of the spine. So the movement patterns that we need to avoid are spinal flexion. So I'm going to bend at my spine. That's compressing the spine where we have the osteoporosis and weakened bone, and we can actually fracture it, and we call that a compression fracture. If I side bend and I have weak bones on the lateral side of the vertebral body, so I side bend my body, I'm at increased risk for fracturing. And then rotation. So if I am having my hips in one direction and my shoulders facing another direction, I am rotating my spine. And if you add those combinations together, like I'm sitting in a chair, I'm bending down and rotating to get my shoes that are on the floor, I'm really risking damage and possibly lifelong pain issues if I have osteoporosis. How does that incorporate into exercise? Well, first of all, we don't want to do any exercises that causes bending. They have a study back in the 1980s from Mayo Clinic that actually showed when we do bending, flexion, rotation exercises, the increased risk of fracture was around 89% in the first year for spinal fractures. So if we're going to do those exercises such as knees to chest, rotation, side bending, sit-ups, we are increasing our risk for a fracture, and we don't want to do that. When we talk about movements when it comes to activities of daily living, how are we going to get things on the floor? How are we going to bend? We keep our spine straight and we bend from our hips. So I call that a hip hinge technique. So I am now able to bend to get something through using my legs, not my back. And that will save us, whether we have osteoporosis or osteopenia, that will save our backs because we are damaging our back every time we bend forward from our spine. The other place that we can see fractures are the hip. And hip fractures are very challenging because the mortality rate that occurs, the long-term disability that comes from hip fractures. And what I try to teach my clients who may have osteoporosis and even osteopenia in the hip is just to avoid very in-range external rotation and in-range internal rotation. And probably the best way to avoid that, and where I have seen fractures occur, is when we're turning. So if somebody is going to turn to the right and they keep their foot planted and I'm turning to the right, my toes are actually on the right foot going to be internally rotated and I'm compressing it through the weight bearing. So if I have really fragile bones, I can increase the risk for a fracture. I explain we need to turn and pick up our feet and take little smaller steps as we turn, but pick up the feet. When we're exercising, same principle, we can do some light movements, but we don't want to do that in-range internal and external rotation of the hip. We want to avoid that. Okay, I hope it helps anybody. If you are concerned about osteoporosis or osteopenia, talk to your doctor, ask about getting a bone density test. It is right now the gold standard in diagnosing. It does not tell us everything, but it is the gold standard at this point for diagnosing osteoporosis and osteopenia. Okay, everybody, have a great day. Bye.